Hi, it's your Panda Big Sis. So, are you too old to transition? Well, the short answer is no, absolutely not. The only time you're too old to transition is when you're dead. You're never too old to start living as your authentic self and find happiness in life being who you were always supposed to be. You're never too old for that. But if you want to stick around for the long answer, then it really depends on what your end goal is. If you're in your 40s and your end goal is to pass after a year or two, then you may find yourself disappointed. When it comes to transitioning, yes, younger the better. The younger you are, the easier it is to pass. Because once you hit your early to mid 20s, especially around 24, 25, that's when your bones ossify. That is, they fuse, they stop growing. Hormones are great, but they're not magic. Okay? They can't unfuse your bones, they can't shrink your rib cage, they can't shrink your shoulders, they can't shrink your height, they can't undrop your larynx. There's a lot of things hormones cannot do. So those who transition in their teens and early 20s, they have an advantage here because their bones are still malleable and their bones will form more femininely rather than masculinely. But if you've gone through your entire life and you're in your 30s and 40s and you've been poisoned by testosterone all those years, there's nothing really you can do about your skeletal structure or the male characteristics testosterone has forced onto you. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to pass after 25. There's many trans people who've transitioned in their 30s, 40s, even 50s and above who pass, but it's very much a your mileage may vary situation. Genetics plays a bigger role in this. For example, if you look like this guy here, then hormones are going to work wonders from you because you've already got the base genetics here to work with. You're already not too masculinized. Hormones could probably feminize this pretty easily alone. However, if you look more like this guy, then hormones aren't magically going to make you look like a cis female. They can't undo that male skull shape, the jawline, the forehead. It's not magic. But even if you do look like this, it's not completely over. There is ways to still pass even if you look like this. And we'll come to that after. Before you decide if you're too old or not, let's talk about what hormones can and cannot do for you. Hormones cannot change your skeletal shape or bone structure. But what they can do is redistribute fat. Body fat redistribution is kind of a misleading name because it's not actually being redistributed as such. What happens in simple terms is where fat cells stores depends heavily on your hormones. People with more estrogen than testosterone, i.e. women, fat tends to go to like hips, thighs. And people with more testosterone, i.e. males, that tends to go to their bellies and places like that. That's why guys always have big pot bellies and girls always have big bum bums. So although hormones can't change your skeletal shape, it will burn off and kill off fat cells in your male places and instead start storing it into your female places, which alone will give you that feminine body shape and a more feminine looking face as fat gets stored in places in your face that look a lot more feminine. For example, fat sort of dies off and burns off around your eyes and moves further down to your cheeks, which gives you that much more feminine look and bigger eyes. So don't underestimate how powerful fat redistribution is. Now this will start around 3 to 6 months, but it takes a long time. I mean, fat cells live for around 6 years. So unless you're burning it, i.e. do your cardio, unless you're burning it, it'll just stay there until it dies, about 6 years. Fat redistribution can take around 5 to 6 years, though the more fat you burn, the quicker this will happen. It's called weight cycling. The idea is to burn your male fat, cardio, and then eat more fat to put it on to your female places. And that's how you get your feminine body. So what else can hormones do for you? Well, it will decrease muscle mass and your strength with it. Not only is testosterone needed to create muscle mass, that's why bodylifters use steroids, right? More testosterone, more muscle creation. But that's not all muscles need. They also need hemoglobin to power those muscles. Without hemoglobin, no muscle power. And people who are estrogen dominant, i.e. females, they have less hemoglobin than those who are testosterone dominant. So although hormones cannot change, such as your height or bone density, it will shrink your muscles and decrease certain cartilage in your joints, for example. So although you cannot shrink your bones, you may still find yourself lose a couple of inches in height, and you'll find yourself with a much smaller frame in general. Hormones will also soften your skin and decrease its oiliness. That's what gives you the more youthful, feminine look. This will begin around 3 to 6 months, and again can last for years. Imagine how many skin cells there are. Skin cells have to die and regenerate, and as they regenerate, they will regenerate softer, which will give you softer and thinner. You'll notice you'll be able to bruise a lot easily and cut yourself a lot more easily, but you'll look a lot more feminine naturally and younger, might I add. HRT can make you look about 5 to 10 years younger alone just from this. Hormones will obviously also cause breast growth. Now, this is very genetic dependent. To know how big your boobies will grow, look at the females in your family. How big are their boobies? Look at your mum and your sisters if you have any. If you don't have any sisters, look at your aunties. Do they have bigger than average boobies, or do they have smaller than average boobies? Let's say, for example, your mum's a C cup, one of your aunties is a D cup, another one of your aunties is a C cup. Then you can safely assume that you will develop B cups. Look at the average size of boobies in your family and take off a cup. That'll be most likely your breast size. But take note, you can also start progesterone later. About 6 months to a year into hormone therapy, you could take progesterone, and that can also add an extra cup and round them out a bit to make them look more natural. Thinning and slowed growth of body and facial hair. Now, facial and body hair won't stop growing entirely, but it will slow down and thin. It's recommended to start electrolysis or laser hair removal as soon as possible, because it doesn't matter how good or bad your genetics are. If you're going out with a 5 o'clock shadow or hairs sticking out of your chin, you're not going to pass regardless, are you? Okay, so that's quite a bit of what hormones can do for you. Let's get back to what they can't do for you. Male pattern baldness. It can't reverse it. Sort of. Again, this really depends on how long you've had male pattern baldness. If you've only been recently balding, as in the past couple of years, then actually HRT may restore some of that. What HRT can do is stop any further male pattern baldness. You won't you won't go any more bald. But if you've been losing your hair very recently, you may actually get it back through hormones alone. If you've been losing it for over a couple of years, then you'll need minoxidil with topical finasteride. If you've been losing it for over 4 years, then a hair transplant or a wig is in your future. Hormones also can't change your voice. For that, you'll need to voice train. You can either do it online through guides. It didn't really work for me. I could never figure out how to do that. The other option is a voice coach, which is probably for the best. There's also voice feminization surgery, but I believe you still need to voice train with that, as it'll only shift your pitch. It won't do anything for your resonance, and it's the resonance that gives us the female sounding voice. Okay, so that's what HRT can and cannot do for us. So let's get back to this guy. You're in your 40s. You are very much masculinized, very much so. What can we do about that? Well, we have forehead contouring. This is when part of your forehead bone is cut, removed, reshaped, and then put back into place. It sounds nasty, but it's worth it. It'll reverse that masculinization and give you a feminine looking forehead. There's also cheek augmentation, which again sounds kind of nasty. They actually fracture your cheekbones and then move them into a different place to look more feminine. This is basically how the fat redistribution works. It just redistributes to different parts to your cheek. But if you kind of look like this and fat redistribution isn't doing it, then cheek augmentation is an option. There is, of course, nose reshaping to make your nose look more feminine. There's lip lifts and augmentations, brow lifts to lift your brows into a more feminine position, face lift to give you a more youthful look that always reads as more feminine. There's jaw angle reduction, which is exactly as it is. See those big masculine jaws here? Well, jaw angle reduction will remove them and make them more in line with a female's. Same with chin width reduction. Great big bulging Adam's apple? No problem. That's where you get a tracheal shave. And of course you can always lower the hairline to appear more feminine, because females tend to have lower hairlines than males. But if you've got the male pattern baldness, a wig or a hair transplant will probably be a better option. Now, if your end goal is to pass, then no, you're not too old to transition. Though it depends heavily on what you look like. If you look like this guy, it's going to take a bit of money and work, but it's not impossible. What if your end goal isn't to pass? What if it's just to live as your authentic self? Then absolutely not. You're never too old for that. Hormones don't just have physical effects. They have emotional and mental effects. Even if there was no chance in a million years I'd ever pass, I still wouldn't regret transitioning. I'm a much better person than I used to be. I'm a much happier person than I used to be. I'm more sensitive. I'm more empathetic. I feel things more. I love life more. I laugh more. I love more. My whole life I was living a lie as somebody else. Life felt like one big pantomime to me. It wasn't real. It wasn't my life. And now, well, I'm living as myself. Now it is my life, and now I feel like I belong in this world. It doesn't feel as fake or horrific, and that alone made it worth transitioning for me. Although before I transitioned, I had all these worries. Am I too old? I've already passed puberty. I'm not in my teens anymore. I wish I transitioned when I was younger, but I'm also so glad that I didn't transition later. The best time to transition is yesterday. The second best time is today. You're not too old to transition, but the longer you leave it, the less time you get to spend on this earth as your true, authentic self. So is it really worth not transitioning now? We only have one life. You aren't coming back when you're gone. How do you want to live the rest of your life? That's the real question. Zippity!